Today on Encore, one of the world's greatest living photographers. His first ever book of breathtaking pictures, Other Americas, showing life across Brazil and Mexico to the mountains of Chile in the 70s and 80s, has just been republished. For 4 decades, he's used his camera to explore questions of politics, economics and inequality with images of ferocious power and beauty. His latest work, Genesis, documents the world's forgotten people and places. He lives part of the time here in Paris. Let's go meet Sebastião Salgado. Sebastião, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here. It's a pleasure to have you.
No, thank you. My pleasure.
Now, your first book of photos, Other Americas, has just been republished. What's it like when you look back at these photos? What does it make you remember? What do you feel?
Well, that is the beginning of my life of photographer. This livre was first published 30 years ago. For me, it's fabulous to be working on this book. I went to the print house to do the printing of the book, and it's living the beginning of my life of a photographer again.
And I mean, you left Brazil when you were in your 20s after your studies. Do you still feel very linked to your country? Because I know, like, at the moment there's lots of demonstrations going on about the government. People are very divided. I mean, do you feel like you're living through that as well? What do you think about that?
I'm very linked to Brazil, absolutely. And I live in France after most part of my life. I lived here. But we cannot deny our origins. A few minutes ago we spoke about my photography. I came from the most baroque state of Brazil, from the state of Minas Gerais. The lights of my states are real, incredible lights. I'm sure that these lights I bring with me, the way that I see the planet, the way that I relate with them, a lot of things I bring from there. And Brazil, for me, is a very interesting place. It's a huge laboratory that made 16, 17 times bigger than France, but with this mixture of races, with this incredible amount of different climates, with one big part of the country that is yet rainforest, with at least 100 of different Indian groups that were not contacted yet, that lived yet in the Stone Age, that don't know nothing of our modern ages now. Brazil is something special.
And it was in that time that you actually became a photographer, because in the beginning you were an economist, you worked in a bank. How did it come that you became a photographer and you picked up a camera?
I work as an economist in International Coffee Organization in London, and I discovered photography here in France. I'm a Brazilian, but I am a French photographer, because everything of photography I discover here. I started photography here. First photography that I took in all my life was 1970 here in France. And after a while, photography made a total invasion in my life. In 1973, I started my professional career here in France.
And one of your first projects was Workers, and you spent 6 years on that, travelling to 23 different countries. And it was within that work that you took the photos of the Serra Pelgada gold mine, and they made you famous. I mean, you talked about them a lot. When you look back at them now, I mean, what do you remember?
Well, it was fabulous to work in this mine. I were real inside Brazil. No one of these guys that work in this mine, they were slaves. They came real to become, to have an opportunity. Because when they reached the gold, it was a very popular mine. We have more than 1,200 concessions there. It's concession that was 2 meters by 3 meters. That was all. And each one of these concessions employ about 40, 50 people. But the day that one concession hit the gold, each person working there had the right to have a bag. Inside you had a lot of gold. And in this moment, they had their independence. They become real, a little bit rich, was supposed to buy a small farm, to buy a small truck, or buy an hotel, anything. And these guys there were in the kind of, well, to get the chance, because not every concession had the gold. Sometimes when one concession had the gold, the guys of the concession had a big opportunity.
And over the years, I mean, some critics or some people have said that, talked about how you make things that are quite horrific, like the mines, like funerals, like dying. You make it beautiful. How do you react to what they say?
It's a kind of thing that's not my problem, because I can do only one kind of photography. I don't do two different kinds of photography all my life long. It's like as a writer. Writer has his own style. He writes in his style from the beginning to the end of his life. Photography is the same. And few people like, and few people dislike. That is normal. That is like it is. That means this debate, this discussion, don't concern me. It concerns the person that discussed it.
And you've been married for more than 40 years now.
More than 50.
More than 50 years now. Wow, congratulations. Your wife has designed many of your books, including Other Americas. She once said that you knew how to take the photos and she knew how to exploit them. What did she mean?
Lelia, she's incredible designer. She's very, very good taste. And in reality, I have the pictures in a book, but the book is her book. She designed the book, she created the book, she made the sequence in the shows. She's the curator of every shows that we have around the world. And I have a big chance to have a person that I love, that I have a big admiration. And we are complementary in our activity. And Leila is the biggest associated that I have in all my life long, in everything.
And she's worked on many things with you, including in the 90s you worked on migrations, which is a very hard project.
Yes.
For you. You've travelled to 35 countries documenting people who kind of abandoned the countryside for cities. And during that time you saw lots of death and brutality in Rwanda, for example. And it nearly made you stop being a photographer. In fact, you became ill and you came back and you went to see a French doctor who told you to stop.
Well, for me, what I did in migration was very hard months of my life sometimes. What I saw in the former Yugoslavia, what I saw mostly what happens in Rwanda with all these countries in the periphery of Rwanda, Congo, Tanzania, Burundi, Uganda, was one of the biggest brutality that I saw in all my life long. And in a moment I started to be sick, psychologically sick, and that affected deeply my body. And I stopped, really stopped to photograph a while. I came back to Brazil. It was a moment that my parents became old. We had a farm in Brazil where I grew on it. That was the paradise when I was a kid. And when I came, was the paradise lost. Was something very destroyed ecologically, as every farmer in Brazil, in my region in Brazil. And with my wife, with Lely, we took a decision to rebuild ecologically this farm. And for now, we had plant about a little bit more than 2 million trees. Wow. And recuperate ecologically this land, absolutely. Look, this picture is very interesting. This forest is what we plant. The left side of the picture is what we had in this farm before. It was completely destroyed like this. And these were rainforests everywhere. And today we have a completely equilibrated ecosystem with incredible amount of insects, ants, birds, water, everything that we want. We create a kind of a small laboratory. They say small because the destruction around is so huge that this kind of national park that we create, this land became a national park. And we created this laboratory. Now we are starting a much more large project to recuperate all our region around.
Wow, no, it's incredible. And while you were working on that, the German filmmaker Wim Wenders, along with your son Giuliano, made a documentary about you and your work and your new project Genesis, which is focusing on the planet. I want to talk about it in a minute, but first let's look at a clip from the film.
A photographer is literally somebody drawing with light. A man writing and rewriting the world with lights and shadows. Little did I know that I was going to discover much more than just a photographer.
There we hear Wim Wenders talking about you and working with you and spending all that time with you while you were doing Genesis. Is it journalism or art or activism that you do? How do you see yourself?
Nothing of this is a way of life. Photography is my life, is my language. I did in my life the things that I wish to do. Because I were so happy to do them, or so unhappy, or so upset, or something that I really wish to show. And I put my life on it. And I built it with my past, with my way to see, with my lights that I bring with me, with my ethic, with my aesthetic, with my ideology. And the result are these pictures. That is much more than everything, my own life, my way of life.
And is Genesis your last great photographic project, or can we expect more from you?
I have another project that I just finished to photograph now, in December 2014, one project that I start photographing before Genesis, that work in parallel with Genesis, a book about coffee. And coffee for me is very important. My parents, my father, when he came to my region, he came from a very far region from there, carrying coffee in the 30s after my father bought one small farm there. And in the end, he had a small industry to prepare coffee for exportation. And when I was a kid, I worked on this with my father. And after I became an economist, I worked in international coffee organization. That is my story. That's the story of my family.
Okay, well, Sebastião, I look forward to seeing it. Thank you so much for coming in and seeing us here on France 24.
Thank you very much.
We're going to leave you now with images from Sebastião's book, Other Americas, which has just been republished here in France. Remember our website, we're also on Twitter and Facebook. There's more news coming up on France 24 after this.